Welcome to Conceptual Chemistry Lectures, Unit number 2, which is Measurement and Experimental Techniques. This topic will cover experimental techniques and common laboratory operators. Why is it so significant to learn about commonly used laboratory operators and experimental techniques? So as you go along studying chemistry in O level, so you will realize that there are so many experiments which we need to do in order to understand and solve ATPs. So experiments are always performed to confirm certain hypotheses, and those experiments which you will be doing involves measurements, and those measurements are actually quantifiers which are based on certain system international units. System international is basically a modern metric system which is used to measure quantities of different things. And in order to communicate scientific information easily all over the world, the scientists use system international units as common standard for their measurement. In order to understand this, let's take an example. Let's suppose someone says that I need 100 what? No one knows. 100 grams, 100 cubic centimeter, 100 liter, or what? Let's suppose more specifically he needs 100 cubic centimeter of water. So this cubic centimeter will be the system international unit, and 100 will be the measurement, it will be the value, and apparatus which is used to collect this 100 cubic centimeter of water will be a flask, and the quantity which is measured in this case is the volume of water. System international unit is also called as SI unit. S stands for system, I stands for international. So these units are basically the standard units for measurement. There are certain physical quantities which are used commonly in chemistry, such as mass, time, volume, and temperature. All of them are having specific SI units, and they are having certain equipments and laboratory operators for their measurement. So the question arises that now, why do we need operators to measure the physical quantities? Let's take an example. Let's suppose in competitive sports like swimming, the difference in timing between two swimmers could be a tenth or a hundredth of a second. Is your watch this much accurate enough to compare the timings of those swimmers? If not, so what can be used to determine the winning time accurately? So definitely there has to be some operators which should measure the time accurately. So that's why there are operators, laboratory operators, which are used to measure accurate volumes of and accurate quantities of the things for the experiments. So what is mass? Mass is basically the quantity of matter in a substance, and its SI unit is kilogram. Kilogram is its bigger unit, whereas it also has some smaller units such as gram. Gram is the smaller unit which is used to measure mass. Industrially, ton is used to measure masses of heavy objects like vehicles or the large cargo boxes. So it will be represented as small t. 1 kg will always be equal to 1000 grams, whereas 1 ton will always be equal to 1000 kilograms or 1000 kgs. The mass of a substance is measured with the help of two operators. One is beam balance and the second one is electronic balance. So these are the two operators which are used to measure mass, and their accuracy rate is up to 0.01 gram. Their accuracy rate is always, the electronic balance will always be having an accuracy rate up to 0.01 grams. So what is the unit of time? The system international unit of time is second. It also has a larger unit which is hours, and it has a smaller unit which is minutes. So always remember 1 hour will be equal to 60 minutes and 1 minute will always be equal to 60 seconds. How can we measure time? There are different operators which are used to measure time, such as stopwatch. Stopwatch is also called as stop clock. So there are two types of stopwatch which are used: analog stopwatch and the digital one. Analog stopwatch will always contain one knob and it contains one main dial. This is the main dial, and it has one secondary dial, which is this smaller one. The knob is used to start, stop, or reset the stopwatch, whereas the secondary dial is used to measure time in minutes, and the main dial will always be used to measure the time in seconds. Digital stopwatch is having such a capacity to read the time, like it can easily read out 7200 of a second. So this is its accuracy rate. Next one is measuring temperature. The System International unit of measuring temperature is Kelvin. It has also other units such as degree centigrade, such as Fahrenheit, and these three different units are interconvertible. So the apparatus which is used to measure temperature in the laboratory is basically thermometer. The thermometers can be mercury thermometer or it can be alcohol thermometer. This is, here you can see, is alcohol, and this one is mercury thermometer. So these are the thermometers which are used to detect the temperature or measure the temperature. A temperature sensor is sometimes connected with a data logger in order to measure the temperature and make more accurate readings. Now, how the volume of liquid can be measured, and what is volume of liquid? Actually, the volume of a substance is the amount of the space which is occupied by that liquid. So there are different System International units which are used to measure volume of liquid, such as cubic centimeter, cubic decimeter, or liter is the bigger unit to measure it. So 1 cubic meter will always be equal to 1000 decimeter cube, and 1 decimeter cube will always be equal to 1000 cubic centimeter. And there are so many apparatuses which are used to measure volume of liquid, because most of the time the scientific experiments are having liquids in them. Burette is the apparatus which is used to measure volume of the liquid, and burette has an accuracy rate 0.1 cubic centimeter. So it can measure easily the volume of liquid. This is its diagram. Here you can see it has one knob. The next apparatus which is used to measure volume of liquid is pipette. So a pipette measures fixed volume very accurately. So what are those fixed volumes? 25 cubic centimeter, 50 cubic centimeter, and 10 cubic centimeter are the fixed volumes which will be accurately measured by the pipette. Next one is measuring cylinder. So this is the diagram of measuring cylinder. Here you can see it is also having a scale, and measuring cylinder is accurate to the nearest cubic centimeter. So it is another way to use, or it is another way to measure volume of the liquid, and its accuracy rate is 0.5. So nearest to 0.5 cubic centimeter of liquid can easily be measured with the help of measuring cylinder. Next one is beaker. So this is the diagram of the beaker, and one more thing, all of these apparatuses can be taken in any of the size. It depends upon the experiment, and it depends upon the volume of the liquid which is required for the experiment. So a beaker is used to measure approximate volumes of liquid. Here is a question: how do we read the volume of liquid? When water or any of the solutions is placed in container, it forms a curved surface, and that curved surface is called as meniscus. You might have also observed it in your daily routine, that there would always be a curve in the container where any liquid is present. So in order to have accurate reading, we have to align the eye with this curve. Then we will be able to get the accurate answer. So here the answer will be 10.5, and here milliliter is used, or ml is the unit which is used over here. Next is measuring volume of gases. Now how can we measure the volume of gases? A gas syringe is the apparatus which will always be used to measure the volume of gases. The gas syringe measures a maximum volume of 100 cubic centimeter of gases. Here you can see this is the gas syringe. And always remember, there are two parts of gas syringe. One is called as a barrel, and the second one is called as a plunger. So this movable part is called as plunger, whereas this part, which is unmovable, which can't be moved, is called as a barrel. Always remember, there will be a scale marked at the surface of the barrel, so we can easily get to know that how much volume of gas is collected into the gas syringe. And this is how we are going to set it up in any of the experimental setups in order to get the gases which are produced in the experiment. And here is a real picture of it, you can see it. So this is how it will work to collect volume of the gases produced in the experiment. Now here comes a question that which apparatus is suitable for our experimental setups. So in order to make an experimental setup, we need to pick up the most suitable apparatus for the experiment. Actually, chemistry is an experimental science, and you may need to plan and perform experiments to learn more about the reaction. It is thus important to be able to select the suitable apparatus for any kind of experiment. In some experiments, gases are given off, and those gases can be collected and identified to help us to find out more about the reaction. So the gases may also be collected for certain other uses. They can also be used in the other experiments. So there are different methods to collect gases, but for collecting gases we have to look at the physical properties of the gases. Two physical properties are very important for the collection of gases. One is density and the second one is solubility. We have to see that how much soluble the gas is into water and how much denser or less denser the gas is compared to the air. So let's have a look at the methods of collection of gases. Two methods of collection of gases are there. First one is displacement of water. Second one is displacement of air. In case of displacement of water, we are going to compare the solubility of the gas in water. And in case of displacement of air, we are going to compare the density of gas to the air. Next one is, in displacement of water, this is the this is experimental setup which is used. Here we are having one water bath. And here we are having this gas jar which is inverted inside this. Here you can see this is the delivery tube which is used. These are the reactants which are inside this closed container, and after the reaction of these two reactants, the gas will be evolved and it will move into this delivery tube. As it will move into this delivery tube, it will go inside the water. If it is soluble, so it can't be collected because it get dissolved into the water. If it's insoluble, so what will happen, these gas bubbles will be evaporated and they will go up and they will be collected in this gas jar over here. So always remember, this experiment is always suitable for all those gases which are insoluble in water or slightly soluble in water. Now what are those gases which are insoluble in water or either slightly soluble in gases? So slightly soluble in water. So some of the most common examples are carbon dioxide, hydrogen and oxygen. These are slightly soluble or somehow insoluble in water. Come towards the next method. The next method is displacement of air. Now displacement of air will be involving two procedures. First one is called as downward delivery, which is mentioned over here, and the second one is called as upward delivery, which will be mentioned in the coming slide. So in downward delivery, always those gases will be collected which are soluble in water, the first thing. Secondly, they have to be denser than air. If they will be denser than air, then they will go down in this gas jar and then they will be collected. In this downward delivery, we are going to use one gas jar, which is this one, and we will be having one delivery tube, which is this one, and this must be connected with any of the experimental containers where the gas is being produced. So this is how it will work. You will have to keep this thing in your mind, that downward delivery will be used to collect gases which are soluble in water and denser than air. So the examples of those gases are chlorine, and we all know that chlorine is a greenish yellow color gas. and hydrogen chloride, which is HCl. So whenever there is dry HCl or hydrogen chloride, so it will be collected with the help of this setup, with the help of this method, which is called as downward delivery. Always remember, for collecting any poisonous gas or for collecting any gas which is having any kind of acidity into it, we will have to carry out that experiment in a fume cupboard. Actually, fume cupboard is a closed setup where the operators or that experimental setup is closed inside it, so any kind of fume will not interact or will not affect eyesight or any other living being. Next one is upward delivery. Upward delivery will be having again a gas jar along with one delivery tube, but remember the gas jar would be inverted over here. Always remember, in case of upward delivery, the gas jar will be inverted. Why it will be inverted? Because the gases which are collected by upward delivery, they will always be less denser than air, so that's why they'll go up. And here you can see this delivery tube is connected with a container. The gas will be produced due to the reaction of any kind of reactant here inside this container, and it will go up in this delivery tube, and the gases will be collected at the top of the gas jar, which is inverted. So in upward delivery, again all those gases will be collected which are soluble in water, but they have to be less denser than air. Example is ammonia. The best example of collection of gases in by upward delivery is ammonia. Next is drying a gas. Now it's very much important to dry a gas. Why is it important? Because sometimes we need to use a dry gas in any kind of experiment. So we can dry a gas by passing it through a drying agent. It's very important to have a drying agent in order to dry a gas. Without drying agent, we will not be able to dry gases, right? So these are the different methods by which we can dry gases: by using concentrated sulfuric acid, by using fused calcium chloride, by using fused calcium oxide. It's like I have written it twice, so by using it is oxide. Okay, now here comes a very significant question, that which drying agent is appropriate or suitable for drying a sample gas. So for that, we'll have to see certain properties of gases. We'll have to see either the gas is acidic in nature, it is alkaline, or it's neutral. The first method of drying gases is this one. This is its setup. Here you can see we have used one Wolf's bottle. This is called Wolf's bottle, and it is having two openings, and it has two delivery tubes. One is inside the concentrated sulfuric acid, the second one is hanging. So you should not dip both of them in the concentrated sulfuric acid. Why? Because you can see that moist gas is inserted from this delivery tube, so it will go inside concentrated sulfuric acid, and then its moisture will be absorbed from the concentrated sulfuric acid. Then the gas which will be dried, it will go up and it will be taken out from this delivery tube. Always remember that concentrated sulfuric acid is used to dry all those gases which are acidic in nature. It can never be used to separate out, or it can never be used to dry any gas which is basic in nature. Why? Because acids can easily react with bases, so that's why we are not going to use any alkali or base in order to separate it out or in order to dry it out with the help of sulfuric acid. Always remember, sulfuric acid will be used to dry all those gases which are acidic in nature, such as moist hydrochloric acid. So this moist hydrochloric acid is injected into this concentrated sulfuric acid, and dry hydrochloric acid will be obtained at the end. Next is quicklime. Quicklime is also called as calcium oxide. We also call it as calcium oxide. So this is the formula of calcium oxide. It is used to dry ammonia. Always remember, ammonia gas will be used to dry out with the help of this setup. Why it will be used to dry it out with the help of calcium oxide? Because here you can see calcium oxide is having basicity. It is a basic compound. It is you can also say it's an alkali. So ammonia is also having all those properties, it is basic in nature, so both of them will not react. So that's why we are going to use calcium oxide or lime to dry ammonia. For that, what are we going to do in this setup? Again, you can see there are two delivery tubes. One is this one, from where the sample or the moist ammonia will be inserted. It will go up, and here we are having calcium oxide or quicklime over here. These are the bubbles of it. And then after passing through this, the dry ammonia will be collected at the other end of the apparatus. Come towards the next part. The next drying agent is calcium chloride. The calcium chloride is always used to dry gases because it's a drying agent. Again, it is used for all those gases which are basic in nature. So moist hydrogen will be inserted from this delivery tube, and here we are having calcium chloride. Here we can also have calcium oxide over here. It's because both of them are basic in nature, so any drying agent can be used. So afterwards, what will happen? Dry hydrogen will be collected from the other end. Always remember that the name of this tube is U tube because its shape is just like U, so it's U tube. This is it. Thank you so very much for your attention. If you are having any query, any question related to any topic, you can ask me straight away. And see you inshallah in the next lecture. Allah Hafiz.